Hello,
Okay.
Robert. It's
Hi, Lolly.
really
Good
great to
morning.
see you
Good
here.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Uh-huh.
Um, Robert, the reason I wanted to do this recording is because, we have known each other for almost 20 years, and
Mhm.
we are both continuum teachers, and you are a breathing expert, and I had the wonderful opportunity of joining your workshops and learning amazing things about breath. And I know that you're teaching now those breathing seminars related to the COVID pandemic.
That's right.
And I thought this information is very precious, and I wanted to make this short video so that we can offer this to the world, this wisdom to the world, for people
Thank
who
you.
are afraid of the pandemic, or both people who actually have COVID and need to find their breath.
Yes, and what I noticed too now, Lolly, is many people are recovering, and now they're talking about what the recovery looks like. And I
Mm.
think that breathing skills are also important for people who have had COVID and are recovering, and how still best to nurture their breathing because they still feel, a little debilitated in their lungs and in their breathing potentials. So I think it's important information for that as well.
Okay, so I
Mhm.
think first you could just tell us a little bit of what is your background in breathing, in breath?
Yeah, well, I've been teaching breathing for 32 years, and breathing is, I've been first teaching in breathing was as a body worker and watching people respirate while I was working on them and their body and being able to use my hands to open up their rib baskets and give them more capacity. Then I became a continuum teacher, and the same thing was true in continuum. We do a lot of movement and a lot of sound, and I saw the limitation people were having with their breathing in terms of making sounds and staying with the explorations in a much more deeper way in their breathing. And I went to a lecture on the Buteyko breathing method one particular time, and that made a lot of sense to me. I was very curious about breathing for a couple of reasons. One, that I was born not being able to breathe, so it started off in my early days. I had children who were severe asthmatics, and I was always looking for an answer for them for their difficulty. And I went and heard this lecture, and I thought that made a lot of sense to me because I am an anatomy and physiology teacher as well. So the science of Buteyko made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So in the early 2000s, I went to New Zealand and studied in a year-long program on how to teach the Buteyko method, which I eventually did, and became a trainer for other Buteyko educators. And a couple of years ago, I became interested in all capnometers, which was a software program and a breathing program that measured actually the breathing that came out of the body, for a little more detailed information about how to best serve people. So I got a certification as a breathing behavior analyst from the Graduate School of Health Sciences in Wyoming, United States. And so all those things accumulating over 32 years, breath has become my major focus. And I love teaching it because I think it's the most essential thing that we do. And it's the most important thing that we do to stay alive. So I'm really happy to be teaching this work.
Well, I just noticed two things: that while you speak, you actually pause and you inhale through your nose.
That's right. I do. For most important, thank you for noticing that, because really one of the most important things that we can do is use our nose for breathing and not our mouths for breathing. So we say in Buteyko, it's corny, but you breathe through your mouth as often as you eat through your nose. So most people don't eat through their nose, so you keep nose breathing. And the reason for that is there are many, many physiological effects that happen when you breathe through your nose that you cannot get when you breathe through your mouth. And a couple of those, but the one that's most primary for me is that mouth breathing tends to trigger the autonomic nervous system to be anxious and to be on alert. So I always use the example, if a bear were to come in through your door, you would go like that, and immediately you would be on alert, with many physiological functions happening to keep you on alert. But that process is only meant to last for about 2 to 3 minutes. Either you beat the bear or the bear eats you that day. So I want to keep my nervous system in a quiet space. So if I start to do this when I'm speaking, my nervous system thinks there's a threat in the space and will begin to activate and motivate my nervous system and put it on high alert. And immediately that speeds up my breathing and puts me on a function for fighting and flighting, not for resting and settle. when resting and settle is what I need, if I'm not feeling well or if I'm recovering from COVID, I need to stay rested and relaxed in my body.
Mm.
So by perpetuating my nose breathing, even when I'm speaking, so the second rule of thumb that I put out for people, and this is an important one and can change everybody's life, is that you pace your activity level so that you can use your nose for breathing all the time. So if you're doing an activity where you feel like you have to open your mouth to keep up with yourself, you're moving too fast. And the same goes through with talking. When I feel like I run out of air, I close my mouth and breathe back from my nose. I give myself a break to take my breath in. And it keeps me in a quieter, calmer place inside of myself and more connected to my own breathing process, which I want to be, to make sure I'm taking good care of it, especially in preventing, and if I were to have COVID or if I was to be recovering, to be intimate with the process of my own breathing as a way of settling myself. We all like intimacy. We all relax when there's intimacy, if it's a relationship or with a family member. And so we can have that quality of intimacy with our own self through our breathing. So as soon as we turn our attention to the fact, just instead of looking at the screen, I just turn my attention automatically to, there I am breathing, I'm immediately connected to myself. I'm feeling my experience. And that's a very important piece for me, because as I feel my experience, in an intimate way, I want to treat myself kindly. I want to treat myself with care. So my breathing automatically connects to that desire and intention and slows down and gives my body a chance to fill up with air until I feel satisfied. And then I start to exhale. And in this case, exhaling is talking. And when I run out of air, I breathe back through my nose. And the speaker often likes that too, because it gives them a rest in hearing what I have to say.
You took the words out of my mouth, because I was going to say this, that listening to this pace, to the pace and seeing how deeply connected you are to yourself, it calms me down. Even through the screen across the Atlantic. And it's beautiful.
Well, it does also speak to the fact that breath is a form of communication between two people. So when we're around somebody who's very anxious and they're breathing in a very anxious way, we get anxious. It's hard for us to self-regulate in calmness when somebody else is very anxious. Like you say, if somebody is calm, then we can also be in that. It can also invite the other person to be in a more relaxed state.
But
so
I want to go back to the nasal breath and just ask, what does it, I understand there's a whole physiological process when you do the nasal breathing, right?
Right. There are some very common things that most people know and you may not know. And one is that it has a filtering mechanism. The nose and the sinuses and the hairs in the nose and the mucus, they all have this ability to filter what's coming into the nose down to about 0.5 microns, which is pretty small. Viruses are smaller, unfortunately, which is why we need to wear masks. But it does help keep some of the pollution out of our lungs. So if we breathe through our mouths, we take anything that's in the air directly into our lungs with no chance of filtering it at all, which makes the lungs more susceptible to infection and weaker. It also controls the temperature. So I like to say it this way, that the nose is the guardian of the lungs. So it filters for the lungs. It controls the temperature for the lungs. If it's too hot, it'll cool the air. If it's too cool, it'll add heat to the air, because there's a lot of blood in our face. It also controls the humidity. It can add moisture to the mucous membranes if it's too dry in the air, or pull some of the moisture out. It produces antibacterial molecules, which kills bacteria before it gets into the lungs. And now we're taking a look at, through COVID, the use of nitric oxide. In the United States, they're using nitric oxide from a machine and putting it into the body, because nitric oxide in SARS in 2006 was discovered to kill the virus. So now hospitals in the US are using nitric oxide from outside sources to help kill the virus in the body. We make nitric oxide in our nose. So when we continue to nose breathe, we're supporting our own health by inhaling our own nitric oxide that gets made when we nose breathe.
Okay.
And there have been studies that if we hum for 20 minutes a day, we can increase nitric oxide production 15-fold. So, you know, if you're preventing or you're sick and you have the energy to hum, be a good thing to do. Just throughout the day, hum a little bit. Make sure when you breathe back after humming, you breathe back through your nose. Don't grab for breath through your mouth, so that you can really take that nitric oxide that got produced in the nose and the sinuses and take it right down deep into your lungs. It helps open up the arteries so oxygen flows more easily. It's anti-inflammatory, so it helps control inflammation, and it's a bronchial dilator, so it helps open the airways. So it really facilitates the health of the respiratory system. So it's important for us to nose breathe for that particular reason.
Robert, could you show us a little bit? How would you hum? How do you suggest? You know, just
something that pleases me, right? I'm not going to put myself on the spot and think, well, I'm going to hum Mary Had a Little Lamb or, you know, Happy Birthday or something like that. I'm a more improvisational hummer. But if you have a song you like to hum, then by all means, hum that song particularly.
Beautiful.
So whatever works for you. But the most important part is, like it's saying, with same thing with pacing myself so I can breathe through my nose all the time. So when I exhale, I breathe back through my nose so that I stay in that quieter place. And then the other benefit from humming is that it actually creates a lot of vibration in the tissues. And so when we're aware of that vibration in our tissues and we breathe back, those tissues begin to move with breath more easily also, because it's created some activity in the tissues. So now the tissues are awake and they go, let's breathe. And so you can feel more movement in those tissues after you've hummed, which helps deepen the breath and keep you quieter and slower in your breathing. Because I think one of the most important things about nasal breathing also, besides the fact that it does support healthy physiological chemistry, which helps support the delivery of oxygen to the cells, that's probably the most important part of nasal breathing, is that it facilitates the distribution of oxygen to the cells in the best way that it possibly can. And we need to be oxygenated. That's the biggest problem with COVID, that we lose our ability to oxygenate. So one of the ways that I really enjoy also nasal breathing is that when I put my attention on my breathing, it slows down. And so I like enjoying watching the relationship of the movements that happen in my body. Air is coming in my body, and my body is moving with that air. So that's my first step in becoming intimate with my breathing, is watching the movement that's taking place as I breathe in and out. And the body is very accommodating. When I'm watching the movement, it slows it down so I can see it better. That's very, very accommodating. And it does do that. And so I'm really I enjoy, things are moving a lot slower. And certainly when we're not feeling well, we need to be moved slower. So it's a meditative process of just watching the movement of breath.
It's beautiful what you're saying, because I understand when we are with difficulty in breathing in the inhale, there is the tendency of thinking that the breath is not a friend, is a foe, is your enemy.
That's right.
And when you are in a relaxed state, you are breathed. Air comes in easily.
That's right.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're being breathed for sure. And to say the other side of that, breath is really your friend. It supports your life. You cannot live without it. It is life. Without a breath, you don't live. And we all know that, which is what makes COVID so frightening, is because we're threatened with the annihilation of our existence into death. So many people die from it. So we're frightened. And so we're frightened of the disease, and we're frightened of how it's carried. It switches through the air. And so we're all on edge about, well, what do I do for myself as best I can, which is why the stay at home has been so important, is because I put myself in less susceptible situations. And also why the masks are important now also, because it keeps the virus from moving in and out of my body. But yes, so let's talk about relaxation. So following the movement opens up the portal to say, okay, if I'm following movement, in my experience, it starts to settle me into having a body, into being in my body, how I can help support that process is that the two phenomenons that happen with the cycle of breath is when we breathe in, we're breathing air into our body and we become a little more buoyant, right? We've got air in our body. We're like a balloon. When we breathe out, that air is leaving and we notice a little bit more of our own weight, that we're, not as buoyant. We're a little more dense, if you will. And then the exhale, that buoyancy of like a balloon that was floating in the air, when it loses its air, it's coming towards the earth. So I want to follow that movement down towards the earth or gravity, onto whatever I'm sitting on and wherever my feet are, and wherever my hands are. So as I exhale, I notice more contact happening where I'm sitting, and I notice more contact with the floor where my feet are, and I notice a little more contact where my hands are resting on the chair. And so I take a moment to really feel that and to just give myself a moment of rest there, that I'm being supported, I'm being held. Something is holding me up. I don't have to be the one who's holding myself up all the time. And if I keep that in my awareness, that I'm actually being supported, and keep that a little bit of my awareness and take my inhale from that sense of support, I think two things happen. One is we breathe lower with more of our diaphragm. Breath opens up from the diaphragm, and I'm breathing from rest. So breath comes in easier. I'm not lifting up to trying to get breath. I'm allowing breath to come in and fill me up without me having to add anything to it. So that's very important to understand. The breath can show us where the support is for our body to be on the earth. Because when we're anxious and we're way up here, we don't feel some support. So it makes us more anxious because we're lost in space, so to speak. But when we come down in the exhale and go, oh, wait a minute, there's that chair. Oh, wow, thank you. There's some support there. And I just keep it in my awareness and breathe. Breath arises from rest and support. And that's a much easier place to breathe from than trying to get breath into a very tight, small space when we're up and anxious in our bodies. There's more space down lower.
I just remembered that many years ago in one of your workshops, you brought an image which I carry with me, all the time, which is that air is all around us. Air is soft, and air is right here. You don't have to,
That's right.
go gasp for air. It's right here. And so this is something that really shifted my breath.
Nice, because there's an immediacy.
Yeah.
There's an immediacy that it's right here, and it's also that the availability is right in front of us or right underneath our noses. Which I just to say, I want to add this, that's the most important thing about wearing a mask, is that we have to orient to the fact that what we're breathing is right under our nose and inside a mask. It's not like all over here flowing where it's inside right here. So it changes our reservoir of breathing, and we have to really accommodate that in our awareness. Oh, I'm breathing inside of something. Okay, well now I have to really be slower because it's got to come through the mask. If I try to grab for big, I'm going to start to increase my heart rate, increase my blood pressure to try to get more air. I have to breathe with what's available. It will filter through. And I just want to say this, the other big thing that happens for people who wear a mask is they overheat. And so what I tell people to do is at the end of your exhale, pause for a beat or two or a second or two and actually feel that heat leave the mask. And the carbon dioxide leave the mask. You won't sense that, but it will leave the mask. So that when you breathe back in the next breath slowly through your nose, the air that's coming through the mask is not coming into a hot space. It's coming into a space that the heat has been dissipated, so you can feel more of the coolness of the air as it comes in.
This is so relevant because I have
Yes, very.
seen doctors who have been advising people not to wear masks because of the overheating and because of the carbon dioxide.
Right. So you have to take that into account. And to everybody I've taught that, they go, oh my God, it makes it so much easier. But then, of course, you have to be careful to not speed up your breathing and create a lot of heat real fast. So that slows the whole process down. So really what I think is going on here, and I think it's a brilliant thing that's happening despite all the sorrow, is that we're being asked to slow down on many different levels. And so where there's a virus attack us first is in our breathing. So it's asking us to slow down. And so that's the whole thing that we have to do to keep a rhythm in our own body that we can work with, is finding ways to breathe in a way that we are, the phrase I like is, we're living our life at the pace of breath.
Beautiful.
And if it's over that pace of breath, then I'm harming myself. And air pollution is one of the biggest causes of people's lungs to be compromised, is because people who are breathing air pollution consistently, like they are in Brazil, like they are in the US, like they are in China, makes their lungs much more susceptible.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's caring for our own lungs and making sure they get treated right by using the nose for breathing, and learning how to relax by just, yes, I can be supported, I can be down, connected to the ground as I breathe in. And that really helps. And so that makes a more diaphragmatic breathing. It's the counterpoint to shallow breathing, which is up here. And because when we breathe down at the bottom of our lungs, like we're doing when we do this relaxation, there's more lung tissue down there, there's more blood down there, so there's more transfer of oxygen down there. So in the hospitals here in the United States, there's two things came up. One was the term recruitment, that many people who come in with shallow breathing are suffering more greatly than those who have a really healthy breathing system.
Mm-hmm.
So they ask those who are shallow breathing to find more lung recruitment, use parts of your lungs that you never use. So, and that's just what we're doing here. Can we learn how to use mostly the back of our lungs and the lower parts of our lungs? Because there's more lung tissue back there. So if we are in a difficult situation, we can find space where maybe there is no space. In other words, COVID may come in and limit some of the space, but if we have this ability to follow the breath, feel it in our lungs, we can try to find places to breathe where there is room to breathe, if we have some facility with being able to manage the movement of our lungs and breath together and be in this relaxed place. The other thing I just want to say, Lolly, before you jump in, is that they were able to keep, and this is important, and it may have the information maybe in Brazil or not, and this is something Pateco said for many, many years, is that the best place to breathe, to get the most value out of your breath, is lying down on your belly.
Mm.
And so what that does is it compresses the front of the lungs, so makes you go to the back for more air, which I said before, there's more air, more lung space in the back than there is in the front. But most people are looking for air here in the front, and you can't get it there. So now they call that proning, and they've been able to keep people off ventilators by just putting them on their belly. Because their oxygenation increases, which is why they were on a ventilator in the first place, because they weren't getting enough oxygen to their cells. And proning facilitated that, which helped people stay off there. So if you're not feeling well, the best position, do not lie on your back, because you're compressing the back of the lungs where you need to breathe. Either lie on your side or on your belly if you can, for up to 4 to 8 hours a day. If you're not feeling well, that back is not the place to rest.
This
You
is
lose
very
40%. Yeah, you lose 40% of your lung function when you lie on your back, because your diaphragm is compressed by your belly viscera, your liver and whatnot. So it pushes up against the diaphragm when you lie flat on your back. So you can't get the full breath. So you want to get off your back for sure. So one of the things, I know it's relevant, so one of the things that I often speak about, and this is really old, this has been around for over 5,000 years, to help people, teach them how to let their lungs breathe them.
Mm.
And it's a really simple thing that you practice, but eventually you'll learn how to do it without having to do this. But you think the syllable sa, S-A, while you're breathing in. You don't say it, you think it, because you'll hear it in your head. And you'll notice when you say sa, when you're breathing in, that your chest becomes more expansive, reduces the tension in the chest wall, and you feel like the lungs are opening from the inside out. And the air is being pulled through your nose. You're not having to exert a lot of energy to get air into your nose.
Mm-hmm.
So it reduces the airway resistance. So eventually you'll know how to do that yourself without saying it. And if you want a bigger breath, you just elongate the thinking of sa and keep opening, and there's no stress there.
This is amazing. This is
Thank you. Yeah. And the exhale, you think the syllable ha, H-A, and you let the air come out on your own. Just think the syllable, just let the air empty your body. Don't push it out. Don't use any effort if you can in your nose or in your lungs. Let it leave. You see yourself get heavy, you're going towards the earth. You let that exhale finish itself until you feel the impulse breathing in. And then you think sa when you breathe in. And that really lowers airway resistance and allows more air to enter the lungs and has more capacity. It increases your capacity for more air, which in COVID is the big problem. The capacity for air starts to shrink and you want to keep it open.